everybody. I'm Tina, Head of Learning and Development, and together with Carla, my colleague, we shape the leadership curriculum at MHP. Now, leadership is a passion that we have in common, and that's why we've been looking into this topic of leadership for many, many years. And we are very happy to be here today and talk to you about leadership. And this seems to be a topic you are also interested in. Or you are our fan base, that could be. Thank you. But to all the others, fantastic to have you here. You seem to be interested in leadership. And you want to hear our answer to leadership. And yes, we have the answer to leadership, regardless for which team or in which area, which size, regardless for which generation or which gender, regardless for which culture, and even regardless of the country. We even say we have the answer to leadership regardless for which style or type of leadership, whether this is disciplinary leadership or project leadership, but we have the answer to leadership. Let your mindset grow with us. And now, before I get right into the topic, I have a question to you. Who of you thinks that leadership is a complex matter? Raise your hand. Very good. So, well, luckily, I think we are all agreed. Otherwise, our talk would be over already. But we thought it would be very cool if we reduce complexity by thinking of an image that accompanies us through this talk. And something that came up as a subsidiary of a worldwide operating automotive company, it was clear, a high-raised garden bed. But why that? Well, because Tina and myself have more interests in common, that is working in the garden. But if you are now worried that this will all be about gardening, don't worry. It only starts on the slide after the next. We start with the theory first. Theory of leadership. If you ask ChatGPT how long leadership has been in place, ChatGPT says since the beginnings of humankind. And it was important to organize huntings and fruit collection. But now looking back at the last 100 years, which leadership theories were around? And this is only a selection I brought along, and this is still quite big. And why is that? Well, in the last 100 years, there were at least 100 styles. And does this have to do with the Industrial Revolution? Is there the demand to establish a new type of leadership? What are the differences between these styles, and what do they have in common? Is this just the old stuff all over again? Or provocatively, is the number of these different styles the proof that none of these styles worked in the long term? I think we should ask what style of leadership would have worked in the past, works today, and will work tomorrow. You can lean back and relax because we have the answer to leadership. Now it's time to talk about high-raised garden beds. And I have to admit, I'm new in this business because I lived in the city center and I had only a tiny balcony and everything I planted died. But when I moved to the countryside 2 years ago during COVID, I bought a high-raised garden bed and I assembled it. And I believe it was not only the city center why it didn't grow, but it was also the lack of knowledge. I didn't know enough about gardening. And I didn't know much about high-raised garden beds. But I knew one thing. Everybody always told me, and it was clear to me, the foundations, the basis is what is most important. Because if you want to harvest at the top and you want to have strong growing plants and it looks nice, requires an intricate system of different layers of soil. And I knew that. And I knew that also when I bought the high-raised garden bed. And I knew that I had to select the right layers of soil to have a healthy and stable foundation for my garden bed. So one step from gardening to leadership, and you might understand how our talk works. Also, in terms of leadership, you need a stable and healthy foundation. And this foundation in leadership is called psychological security, psychological safety. Psychological safety has become a trend buzzword, but it's very important for everybody who doesn't know it yet. The basis of psychological safety is trust. Without trust, an executive cannot generate psychological safety. And it is absolutely necessary for a healthy foundation. Psychological safety means that you dare to do things, that you dare to try out new things, that employees dare to come up with new ideas. Psychological safety also means that we have a healthy error culture, that we dare to do things the wrong way and learn from it. Psychological safety also means that you dare to speak up and that you dare to speak up and share your opinion even though your boss has a different opinion. Psychological safety also means that we live together and we shouldn't work against each other. That we can be joyful together, that we can celebrate our success together, and all this is a sign of a healthy foundation and a psychological safety. And this is how growth is happening. Stable foundation, check. So all boxes ticked. Growing tomatoes and leading teams, the prerequisites are given. Now, if I have a high-raised garden bed with a stable foundation, I also need plants. First of all, I look at what I want to have in my bed, and then when I select the plants, I need to consider different things. I have to answer questions like, does it need sun or shadow? How much water does it need? And how much space does it need to have enough space for their roots? And if I looked at the single ones, the individual plants, then I look at the harmony amongst all the plants in a group. And although it sounds a bit esoteric, we can have a look at it in the biological sense. If I put two types of different vegetables in one bed, too close, then none of them will grow. And for example, if you look at apple trees, if you don't have a second one in 500-meter distance around it, then nothing will work. And if we translate this to leadership, we first of all have to answer which individual needs our employees have. How much space do they need to grow their roots? And once we answer these questions, we can have a look at the topics. I think it depends very much on the situation, whether this leads to success. Sometimes a creative person needs another creative person to flourish, and sometimes they need an idealistic person. And all these questions in the team can only be answered if you talk to your team, if you observe what they are doing at work, if you reflect with them individually and with them in the group. And if you do that, you can establish the best growing conditions. And then the work starts. Because what do we need to do every evening in the dry summer month? We have to water the plants, yes. Every night, if it wasn't raining, you go out with the water can and you pour water on the plants so that they can grow. We have to give the plants something. And when we prepared this talk, this was the point where I thought, okay, how can I get back from watering plants to leadership? But it's actually clear. As an executive, I also nourish my employees. I give them input. Could be ideas or impulses, or it could be decisions I make or guidelines I define. And just as it is with the plants, it's with the employees. With plants, it's like this. There are different needs. One plant likes me to water it with the big water can, and then it can stretch its leaves and collect all the water driplets. Whilst there are other plants who prefer watering at the root or the stem of it. And this it can be transferred to employees because there are different needs amongst your team members. So some of them I water with ideas, and they just pick the idea they need or want and continue working on this. Whereas somebody else is overwhelmed and needs something more targeted, for example, one targeted suggestion with which they can continue to work. And then there's another issue with the plant. If I don't know these rules or something changes on the way, because this is a process, then you get into the moment where I walk out and I think, oh, this plant doesn't look so good today. And it makes me nervous because I have to try out and test. Did I water it too much or too little? Or perhaps it's time for a fertilizer. And that's just the same, that you meet your employees' needs and watch them. Do they look healthy? Or do they show any signs that they're not doing so well? And here we have one advantage, and that is an advantage above gardening. People can talk. That's brilliant. It's great. As an executive, I have the opportunity to ask my team members, how do you feel? What do you need? I have the impression that you're not doing so well. Are you stressed? Is it something else? You can talk to me. And this advantage goes very far. It's not a one-way road, because also the other way around, employees can phrase their requirements, their wishes directly to the executives. And you can tell each other what you need, and together you can find solutions. And then there are these days, you get up in the morning, pull up the blinds, and you see the sun is shining. In your gown and the slippers on, you walk into the garden and you look around. But suddenly there is nothing there. All your tender care is gone. Snails were there. And you might know your team members really well and consider their needs. Sometimes it's not enough. There is rain, wind, and slugs and snails. Or there are offers of external companies and different circumstances in life, or a COVID pandemic. And all this is not in your power. But we are convinced if you have psychological safety in your team, you are in a good position to work with your team. And the external influences which are beyond your power, you can handle them and still make the best out of it. And if we forward all these challenges, then we get to the moment where you can harvest. In the summer months, this is the most beautiful thing. You can go out in the garden in the evening, see what is ripe, and then you can pick fresh tomatoes, a cucumber, or a bit of lettuce, and take it to the kitchen, and then I make a really nice salad. And last year, in my first high-raised garden bed year, I really celebrated it every night because it felt like going shopping in the own garden. And it was so good that everything was ripe and we could eat it. And of course, you will also be able to harvest in leadership. We have so many success stories we can celebrate and best with the team together. Could be, for example, completed projects which we can celebrate as a success in our team. It could also be milestones we achieved or a go live. And that is the harvest. For me personally, the harvest is also the growth of my employees. Personal growth. If I can see how they developed and how they are doing things now for which they needed my support in the past. Or if they suddenly do things they would not have dared to do a year ago. This is growth and this is success in leadership, and that's my personal harvest. And for everybody who thinks, well, a bit more theory would have been good, less garden, more leadership. Well, everything we told you today on the metaphor of the high raised garden bed is referring to individual leadership. And compared to the other leadership styles, you will not find a standard definition, because individual leadership cannot be pressed into one form. And perhaps leadership feels even more complex than you thought at the beginning. But we are convinced about it, and that's why we're here. We are convinced that leadership can be easy if we observe individual behavior and accept it. And although I said there is no standard definition, we dared one attempt and we brought 3 points along. Number one, people are complex. The first step for individual leadership is to accept that human beings are complex individuals who have individual needs, and we have to respond to this individually. And this means the water can principle doesn't work here. Number two, talk to each other. Use this great advantage that we human beings have compared to plants. Communicate your needs. Talk to each other, check what the other one needs, and communicate. And the third and last point, and I think that is the easiest, is just test it out. Try things, either alone with individual employees or in the team, and then you reflect on what you've heard or what you've done. And if it didn't work, you do it again. And the two of us are sure you are not only the best gardeners, but you also have the answer to leadership. Thank you.